And another article too is to do with pedophilia. Now I said when Jimmy Savile stuff all broke out, and long before Jimmy Savile came along, I said eventually there'll be no such a thing as pedophilia. It'll be off the books. And that's the push that comes out of this. Now what I said came out of the Savile thing, it won't be anything that you expect. Because it's not to put these guys away or stop it. It's to have a new look at pedophilia. Does it really harm anybody? And I'm not kidding. I said this years ago. Years ago. It says, the Jimmy Savile scandal caused public revulsion, but experts disagree about what causes pedophilia and even how much harm it causes. You see? And it says, there's little agreement about pedophilia, even amongst those considered experts on the subject. What, are they pedophiles or something to be experts on the subject? In 1976, the National Council for Civil Liberties, the respectable and responsible pressure group now known as Liberty, made a submission to Parliament's Criminal Law Revision Committee. It caused barely a ripple. Childhood sexual experiences willingly engaged in with an adult, it read, result in no identifiable damage. Now, I've talked to you before about these people, and what the real agenda is to destroy your cultures totally. All these councils and so on that look into rights and civil liberties are there to destroy your cultures, and then they become the dominant minority, folks. Because they'll get rid of yours. And then they rule you just like they did in the Soviet Union. This is the real need is a change in the attitudes which assumes that all cases of pedophilia result in lasting damage. It's difficult today after the public firestorm unleashed by revelations about Jimmy Savile and the host of child abuse allegations they've triggered to imagine any mainstream group making anything like such a claim. But if it is shocking to realize how dramatically attitudes to pedophilia have changed in just 3 decades, it's even more surprising to discover how little agreement there is now amongst those who are considered experts in the subject. A liberal professor of psychology who studied in the late 70s will see things very differently from someone working in child protection or with convicted sex offenders. There's astonishingly not even a full academic consensus on whether consensual pedophilic relations necessarily cause harms. Well, remember too, the pedophile grooms his victim to be the whore. And that's generally what they stay for their whole lives afterwards. They know this at the top. It says, so what then? What do we do now? A pedophile is someone who has a primarily or exclusively a sexual interest in prepubescent children. Savile appears to have been primarily an ephemophile, we call it, defined as someone who has a similar preferential attraction to adolescents, though there have been claims that one of his victims was aged 8. There was more than one of his victims aged 8 or below. Not all pedophiles are child molesters, and vice versa. By no means every pedophile acts on his impulses, and many people who sexually abuse children are not exclusively or primarily sexually attracted to them. In fact, true pedophiles are estimated by some experts to account for only 20% of sexual abusers. It's much higher if you get away from these some experts, you see. See how the wording's done to make you start, well, you know, it's a small minority. Nor are pedophiles necessarily violent. No firm links have so far been established between pedophilia and aggressive or psychotic symptoms. And as I say, they groom them, they give them candy, and they tell them little stories and stuff. And they get into the little world with them. And then they start a little intrusive behavior. They can take months, sometimes years to groom them. That's part of what they like, is this grooming, you see. They get off on it. And so they don't have to be aggressive. And these experts know this as well. Psychologist Glenn Wilson, co-author of The Child Lovers, a study of pedophiles in society, argues that the majority of pedophiles, however socially inappropriate, seem to be gentle and rational. No kidding, folks, they're gentle and rational people. They just leave a wake of hell behind them, of wrecked people. Legal definitions of pedophilia, needless to say, have no truck with such niceties, focusing on the offence, not the offender. The Sex Offenders Act of 1997 defined pedophilia as a sexual relationship between an adult over 18 and a child below 16. They've changed all that now too. It says there's much more we don't know, including how many pedophiles there are. 1 to 2% of men is a widely accepted figure, but Sarah Good, a senior lecturer at the University of Winchester and author of 2 major 2009-2011 sociological studies on pedophilia in society, says the best current estimate based on possibly flawed science is that 1 in 5 of all adult men are to some degree capable of being sexually aroused by children. I kind of doubt that. Based on possibly flawed science. Don't forget that part before you read the rest. Even less is known about female pedophiles. Actually, tonight I'll put one on some of the female pedophiles in the US. Because it's to do with the serotonin reuptake inhibitors that they've got all the youngsters on today, and a lot of the adults as well. And the list of female teachers that are on this stuff who are now engaged in sexual activity with young boys in a school is just astronomical. Astronomical. Anyway, so they know a lot about female pedophiles. Debate still rages too about the clinical definition of pedophilia. Down the years, the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Stats Manual of Mental Disorders, their Bible as they call it, has variously classified it as sexual deviation, a sociopathic condition, and a non-psychotic medical disorder, and few disagree about what causes it. Is pedophilia innate or acquired? Research at the Sexual Behaviours Clinic of Canada's Centre for Addiction and Mental Health suggests pedophiles' IQs are on average 10% lower than those of sex offenders who have abused adults, and that pedophiles are significantly less likely to be right-handed. They go into this eugenics all the time. To be right-handed than the rest of the population, suggesting a link to brain development. That's really going to be good news for all left-handed guys, isn't it? Be terrified now. MRI scans reveals a possible issue with pedophiles' white matter in the brain. Now, this is neuroscience coming into law, you understand. They've already got psychopaths off with committing horrific offences in the States and other countries because they've got to legitimize themselves as a science. They've got to become legitimate. And this is how they're doing it. They're getting into all these areas and say, these people can't help it. You see this bit of white matter in the brain, it might be that's a problem. It might be, Of course, 99% might not be at all, that little part of the brain. But you see that they're going to try and verify a science with very obscure facts. If they're facts at all, for that matter. So this is where we're going with it, you see. It says this is radical stuff. It's a growing conviction, notably in Canada, that pedophilia should probably be classified as a distinct sexual orientation. You understand? Homosexuals started it, you see. Then lesbians, and actually lesbians became before homosexuals in the pressure groups. And then we've got LGBT and a few other ones at the end, that I haven't really caught up on what they are yet. Two eminent researchers testified to the fact in a Canadian Parliamentary Commission last year at the Harvard Mental Health Letter of 2010 stated baldly, it says, that pedophilia is a sexual orientation and therefore unlikely to change. So it's their right, it's a sexual orientation to diddle little children. And also put up the Canadian bill, to change all too with these so-called experts. You see, I'll also put that up tonight as well, for those who want to have a look at it. So eventually there'll be no such thing as pedophilia. There'll be another sexual orientation. And then down the road, rapists are already trying this. The same tactic. Well, I see we're attracted, we get excited when we rape someone. This is how it's going, folks. And the ones at the top are pushing all this because your culture must be totally annihilated. Remember, I talked so many times about the guys who came in with their particular schools of thought into the West from the East. Back with more after this. Hi folks, I'm back. We're cutting through the matrix and just talking about pedophilia being normalized by experts, you see, who have an agenda to destroy your culture. And again, go into your history books, look at the Macy Group, look at the Frankfurt School that were brought into the US and Britain and elsewhere to destroy the cultures of the West, to make it safe for other people. I'm not kidding you. If you read their own literature, they tell you why they were doing it all, and they were given governmental permission to go ahead and teach this and change your culture through universities and so on. Still taught today. And remember, Adorno, who worked with the Frankfurt School, said that we must destroy the cultures of the West totally down to beyond necrophilia before we'll be finished, he said. And that's what you've got working, folks. Same agenda. And Bilderberg picked EU leader Van Rompuy calls for global governance with Russia. This has been out for a few days, but It says, well, much of the Christian, post-Christian worlds were busy rushing about in last-minute preparations for Christmas celebrations. An important event took place in Brussels, Belgium. They went largely unnoticed and are unreported. Leaders of the EU Union and Russia met in Brussels December 20th and 21st for the 30th EU-Russia Summit. Did you know they had a 30th EU-Russia Summit? Continuing a process of convergence and interdependence that is leading towards political, economic, and social merger. Look up merger, folks. Yeah. In his remark at the conclusion of the summit, Herman Van Rompuy, President of the EU Council, made repeated reference to progress towards the goal of global governance, which has always been a code in globalist circles for world government. Rompuy stated, by working together, the EU and Russia can make a decisive contribution to global governance and regional conflict resolution, to global economic governance in the G8 and G20. This is communism, folks, if you don't get it. Economic governance. This is communism. In the G8 and G20 and to a broad range of international and regional issues. I would like to congratulate President Putin for taking over the presidency of G20. As reported in this magazine many times, the term global governance is an intentionally deceptive term used by political ruling elites because it's more vague and mushy and sounds less threatening than global government or world government. Hence, there will be less political opposition mounted to global governance than world government. So I'll put that up tonight as well. All these links I'll put up tonight at cuttingthroughthematrix.com.